If you have one of these job site saws like this DeWalt, you'll know that the table in front of the blade isn't quite big enough to use the miter gauge in all situations like this right here. I'm going to make an infeed table for this. Let's get to it. I want to do this without making any permanent modifications to the saw. It's going to be a little difficult because the front of it's all plastic, but there is a steel pipe running right behind this hump in the front that should give me some kind of stability. So the first thing I need to do is mount a piece of plywood to the front that I'm going to use as the base for the infeed table to attach to. And the first thing I need to address is it's banging into the fence adjustment knob, so I have to knock this corner off here. And now you can see it fits a little bit better, but I still have another issue, and that's with the bevel adjustment. Now it's going to bang into the corner of this piece of wood, so I need to take this corner off right here. All right, that's better. I took off a little bit more than I needed to, but that's okay. As long as everything works properly, nothing's going to bang. Now I just need to figure out how to mount this. I'm going to start with putting some T-nuts into the back of this. That way I can take the infeed table on and off if I need to without making a big hassle out of it. I'll just use some knobs. So first thing is I'm doing a little countersink so the T-nuts will sit flush, and then drilling through the rest of the way. And these are just quarter 20 T-nuts that I'm using here. And because this is a table saw, there's going to be a lot of vibration. So I'm just going to add a screw behind each of these T-nuts so they don't back out if there's a lot of vibration. Now I need to find some way to attach this to the saw, and I'm looking for a bracket, and I think maybe something in here will work. That's pretty crusty. I'm going to go with this one here. It's just a little bit too big on the one side. I only need the one hole. So I'm going to cut this off. And it's just a tiny bit too wide, so I'm just filing the edges down a little bit so it'll fit where I want to put it. Round the corners off so I don't cut myself. And it's going to go right here where this screw is, and the screw's long enough, so I'll just take this screw out and then screw the bracket in right there. Now that bracket's hanging down far enough that I'll be able to screw it to this plate here to mount it on this side. This right here is a 3/4 EMT clamp, and I didn't know this before I started this project, but there's two different kinds. This one here is a 3/4 rigid clamp, and they're both for 3/4 electrical conduit, but they're different sizes. The rigid is a little bit bigger than the EMT clamp. So the rigid clamp is just about an inch, and the pipes on the DeWalt saw are an inch, so I'll use that. And the EMT clamp is about 7/8. So if you want to do this on a DeWalt saw, you're going to need the 3/4 rigid clamps. Don't get the EMT clamps, they won't work. And all you have to do is take it to the side pipe, clamp it on there, and then take your plate and can screw it right into the back of that. Unfortunately, I have a little bit of an issue here. The plate that I just attached to the saw isn't square to the tabletop. So the brackets that I'm going to use for the infeed table can't be square, but I'll deal with that later. First, I need to take this adapter plate I'm making out of 1/4-inch plywood and have to cut a notch for that bracket that's hanging down on the front. Then I also put some holes in here that I'll put the knobs in, and I just ovaled them out a little bit so that way I have some adjustability here. I don't have to worry about getting the height exactly perfect. And now I have to use this sketchy setup on my table saw with my miter gauge to cut a notch into these blocks of 6x6-inch plywood that I'm going to use for the brackets. Probably should have used a jigsaw or a handsaw. And I'm just temporarily screwing them to the adapter plate. For now, they're going to have to come back off. All right, let's see how it fits. Seems okay so far. We'll have to trim those brackets a little bit at the bottom. And I'll just take these knobs that I have laying around and I'll use those to attach it to the plate that's on the saw. This is the best way I could come up with to figure out what that angle is. With the top of the table saw, I just took a straight piece of wood and clamped a block to it that's the same thickness as what my infeed table is going to be, and then just mark the angle directly on the bracket. And like pretty much every project, I had to take a break in the middle and make this jig for the miter gauge so I could safely cut these brackets. I think in between this project and my next project, I'll work on trying to figure out how to work the autofocus on my camera. That's really annoying. To line up the infeed table, I'm just using some double stick tape on the top of the brackets and a piece of scrap in the right-hand miter gauge. I don't want this infeed table to be that wide, so I'm going to put it just to the left of that right-hand miter slot so I don't have to worry about banging into it if I need to use it. And I'm just using a straight edge to mark where I need to route out a dado for the miter gauge. So that way the miter gauge will sit flush with the top. To cut the dado, I just decided to use the table saw since I was there. But you could just as easily use a router or a hand plane to make a dado in the infeed table. And even if you're a power tool woodworker, you still need to have a decent set of sharp chisels in the shop. I'm going to assemble everything with the pocket hole jig. That way I don't have to drill holes in the top of the table. It'll be nice and smooth. All the screws will be put in from underneath. And this all gets glued. I may have gotten carried away with the screws. When you adjust your infeed table, you should make it so that the infeed table is just slightly higher than the stock table of your table saw. And now I can use my miter gauge to cut a wide piece of wood or a weird angle if I need to, and I won't have any wobbling. I ended up adding a second clamp on the back of the plate just to stiffen it up a bit. And depending on how you feel about it, you may want to put a block of wood right here and glue it to the back of the plate so it stiffens it up down there. Thanks for watching.